more than a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mendel. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show with Dave Manouk. With Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mendel, here for the next couple of hours, talking everything to do with the Winnipeg Jets. The Stanley Cup has been awarded. Finally, congratulations to the Vegas Golden Knights. It's now time for silly season to begin in earnest. I would strongly suspect the next couple weeks could be filled with some fun, some games, some trades, some speculation, and a whole lot of ink being spilled regarding the Winnipeg Jets and the NHL as a whole. Dave M., good morning. I normally would start with you and say hello and all that jazz, but we have to, of course, talk about Dr. Ginsburg, clean-shaven Dr. Ginsburg, and his palatial palace. Look at that retreat where the man is broadcasting from. That is not just a background, folks. Ezzy is among the tall pines and looking radiant with the sun and the birds tweeting in the background.
Wow, what an intro, Drew. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's God's country out here. About 25 minutes past Lac du Bonnet at my wife Naomi's family's cottage. It's beautiful, about 17, 18 degrees Celsius.
Now, is that is that just like a bird noise, or is that bird just very, conveniently making its presence known on the show at the same time?
No, those are real birds. There's woods around us here. So yeah, I'm not sure what kind of bird. Dave knows his bird sounds. I think I can recognize a blue jay and a few other birds, maybe a robin, but I'm not sure what that is. But no, those are real birds.
It's a hawk.
No bears around right now, Drew. That's going to be a whole different situation if I see a black bear. But yeah, it's pretty fun. We don't get to do the show. I'm basically trying. I told you guys right before we came on air, I'm trying to replicate what Drew did last year at the 22-22 draft. When he was broadcasting live from his in-laws in Kentucky and he had the woods behind him. The funniest part of that show, as you guys remember, is when by the end of the show, it was pitch black behind Drew and it looked like he was doing the show in a back alley. Yeah.
Ezzy, the highlight of that was when Drew kept looking over his shoulder because there were sounds coming from the woods. No.
Well, the sounds definitely made me reconsider where I did the last part of the show from. I went inside, I think, for safety reasons. You never know what's going to come lurking in the woods. Maybe Cocaine Bear was going to you going to Ezzy, possibly.
Ezzy Bear.
He's just going to jump out at me or something along those lines.
Yeah, but you know that Ezzy Bear is just going to give you a big hug. Like, you don't have to worry about Ezzy Bear attacking you. It's just going to be a hug, and then I'm just going to ask you for all of your food. That's all.
I was just going to say, and in true bear style, eat all your food.
Yeah, he's going to steal my picnic basket is exactly what's going to happen. Dave M., good morning to you. Good, sir. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Drew. Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be on the show. Good to be here for the full show as opposed to last week. We're at bail after an hour. You guys.
How was the bat mitzvah, Dave?
Bat mitzvah was good. Good food. Good times. She did a great job. So shout out to Paula. But yeah, no, it was a good bat mitzvah. As bat mitzvahs go.
Anyways, yes, we will be here for the full 2 hours, all three of us, unless Ezzy, gets mauled or something like that. But that'll be entertaining nonetheless. We, of course, start with the Jets. And, of course, we start with, I think, Pierre-Luc Dubois, because his name is at the forefront. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck is also at the forefront. But I think there's more noise right now regarding Pierre-Luc Dubois and what everyone assumed was going to be a foregone conclusion that he'd somehow end up in Montreal. Well, reading the tea leaves, reading the speculation, reading the innuendo, reading the rumors, it sounds like the LA Kings might be at the forefront of those negotiations. It sounds like the LA Kings may be the ones who are going to step up, and it sounds like Pierre-Luc Dubois might be intrigued by the idea of being a long-term member of the Los Angeles Kings. We know that Anze Kopitar is not getting any younger, still a hell of a hockey player, but I think the LA Kings sort of see that there could be a bit of a, maybe a transition there seamless transition in their hopes. Now, in my estimation, Pierre-Luc Dubois is not Anze Kopitar, and never has been, and time will tell if he ever will be. In terms
Not
of
many players are, right? Like I think
Right.
you guys would agree he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Right, exactly right. And now Pierre-Luc Dubois would hope to get to that level. But, from the Jets' perspective, sure, you may not be thrilled about him staying within the conference, but let's be honest. The only difference of that is you play 2 games against the Montreal Canadiens each year. You might play 3 games against the Los Angeles Kings. So that would be what I would describe as a very minor factor, because the LA Kings, when it comes to prospects, when it comes to those sort of the young talent that the Jets have been said to be looking for, Dave, the LA Kings are loaded and probably in more of an advantageous position to offer some of that young talent than the Montreal Canadiens are.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And look, even from a leverage perspective, even if LA doesn't end up becoming the front runner, although as Elliot Friedman reported, I think in yesterday's 32 Thoughts podcast, he said they're leaning hard into Pierre-Luc Dubois. And then he mentioned Colorado, but he really
Funny,
said,
Dave, because Pierre-Luc Dubois leans hard into opposing defensemen, right?
Well, maybe that's what they're hoping to create, Ezzy. But the fact is that even if it doesn't end up coming to fruition, what it ends up doing is it says to Montreal, you got to play ball, because right now everyone in Montreal thinks that they're getting Pierre-Luc Dubois for free. They're basically like, here's your magic beans, the last pick in the draft in the first round, and maybe some B-level prospect. We'll take Pierre-Luc Dubois off your hands for pennies on the dollar. Although evidently, as he's looking for around $9 million a season, which is insane. So that's a whole nother, can of worms that they're going to have to figure out.
He's not worth $9 million a season right now.
It's a crazy,
really not.
It's a crazy number. I mean, it's not even. One of the quotes, and it was from Friedman yesterday, and he said it came from Isaiah Thomas, of course, former Raptors. Was he a GM? But obviously Detroit Pistons great. Yeah. Isaiah Thomas told him as it approaches the draft, everybody's lying.
Into Pierre-Luc Dubois. That's shocking.
What's that?
That Isaiah Thomas is an insider when it comes to Pierre-Luc Dubois?
No, but he was an insider into the draft, because he said everybody's lying, everybody has an agenda. And look, even if this is not a truth, the fact is it helps the Jets out. So even if the LA Kings are not the front runners, although there's no reason to believe this is erroneous information, but if you take it with a grain of salt, as the reality for the Jets is it forces Montreal to up their ante a little bit.
Absolutely. And, there is a connection between LA and Montreal, right, with Phillip Danault. And I said this several weeks ago, right? Guys, like, obviously, Anze Kopitar is not going to be traded. He'll finish his career as a King, most likely. A lot of people are talking about Quinton Byfield, who Dennis Bernstein on Winnipeg Sports Talk earlier this week talked about. He's been used on the wing with Anze Kopitar, right? So, I mean, Quinton Byfield is the obvious guy that all Jets fans are talking about right now. And I think Byfield's intriguing, right, guys? Because I think you'd agree that, at 20 years old, he hasn't even scratched the surface of what he's able to do, right? You look at a guy like Mark Scheifele, he really, hit his stride at, 23, 24 years old. I think that's safe to say, right? So I think there's some intriguing pieces that you could kind of speculate about, Dave, as far as, PLD trades go. I know Brandt Clark is a top defenseman. Dennis Bernstein said,
what about Brandt Clark as the right shot defenseman?
Right. And apparently, Brandt Clark is not a guy that they're going to consider moving. So, I mean, you're talking most likely about Quinton Byfield. Gabe Vilardi, I believe, needs a new contract, right? He's an RFA, if I'm not mistaken. And he had a really good year last year, so he's going to get a raise. So, I mean, is there some type of package involved? Like, I don't know if Dubois for Byfield straight up really is something that I would consider, just because Dubois, say whatever you want about Pierre-Luc Dubois, he's an established center in the NHL, right? Like, he probably, will hit his career high in points, in the next 2 or 3 years. I think that's safe to say. But he's established, whereas Quinton Byfield, he's only played 1 full season, right? And we know that his offensive numbers were a little bit underwhelming. But again, reminder, he's 20 years old. How many times have we said that when you're talking about whether it's Cole Perfetti or whether you're talking about Ville Heinola? You have to remember these guys are in their early 20s. And they're the infancy of their pro careers, right? So the Los Angeles Kings make a lot of sense because of what Drew said. Anze Kopitar, back 9 of his career. And this is a team that is kind of on the brink, right? Like they need to get past some of those upper echelon teams like the Vegas Golden Knights, like whether you want to admit it or not, the Edmonton Oilers have been one of the better teams in the West, and LA is one of those teams that, is trying to elevate their lineup. So Pierre-Luc Dubois makes a lot of sense. I think Connor Hellebuck also makes a lot of sense, but do you have the assets? Like, I think, guys, when you're talking about whether it's LA, whether it's Montreal, I mean, we've heard Boston out there, we've heard Dallas out there, even Tampa Bay, Jeff Merrick mentioned a week ago. You have to wonder if you could see a couple of these guys in a massive blockbuster trade. I think a lot of people have been focused on the 1-for-1, but you wonder if a team is going to take a swing at both Dubois and Hellebuck.
Well, both from the LA perspective, because LA is, of course, would still sort of be in the market for a goalie. They have the Joonas Korpisalo. That's who they acquired at the end of the season last year from Columbus as part of that Jonathan Quick sort of three-way trade situation. But Korpisalo is a UFA, and do you trust him as your number one goalie? For on the long term. Phoenix Copley is also there. He's under contract for this year at $1.5 million. Phoenix Copley, veteran sort of journeyman goaltender, isn't one that's really moving the needle when it comes to goaltending success. I don't think that and I've heard people talk about the Dubois and Hellebuck to LA, and like you said, as really make it a blockbuster. I just don't think LA's got the cap space in which to accommodate that, because there's also talk that as part of a Dubois sign and trade, which is what has been rumored to be with any team, not necessarily strictly LA, the Jets would have to take a contract back. You've heard the name Victor Arvidsson mentioned. Arvidsson, of course, signed with LA a couple years ago. He's got 1 year left on his deal at $4.25 million.
Doesn't make sense to me, though, Drew. I imagine you guys think the same way, because Victor Arvidsson, good player, right? But Victor Arvidsson, he's not a young man. He's 30 years old.
Right.
And wouldn't you rather have a player that you have team control over?
No.
And I think you guys know the answer to that. I know what you're saying. He would be more of a throw-in to the deal. He wouldn't be the centerpiece.
He makes the
of the
money
deal.
work.
I just don't know. I don't see, is Victor Arvidsson cracking the Jets' top six?
I think look, if LA needs to shed money to make a deal happen, I think Victor Arvidsson coming back to Winnipeg would be a very fine acquisition, not as the main piece. Don't get me wrong. He's not the headline piece in that trade. But Victor Arvidsson, good veteran player, guy who had a lot of success in Nashville for all those years. I think him coming back and just, again, fortifying the Winnipeg Jets, who are insistent that they're not in a rebuild, that they still see some sort of open window for whatever. He's another.
You still have
player.
Such a big hole up the middle, though, Drew. That's the problem.
Well,
I don't see a package of like Byfield and Arvidsson for Dubois. That's the thing. Like, if you're talking about, people are talking about Arvidsson or Sean Durzi. First off, Durzi just had a career year, and the Kings really like Durzi. He was playing in their top four. So I just think that people are going through the Kings roster and basically, picking every single guy except Drew Doughty, right, Dave? So yeah. I don't know. I mean, I just think that Quinton Byfield makes a lot of sense. He's an intriguing prospect, but I just, for me, Dubois for Byfield straight up. You're trading an established player for a guy that hasn't established himself. He probably will. I think Byfield's going to be a really good NHLer. I really do. He's got the size. He's got the everything. He's the total package. He's probably the closest 20-year-old prospect to Dubois that you're going to get in a trade scenario, right? I just don't see that being a straight-up trade.
I don't think Byfield. Sorry, David. I don't think that LA is going to trade Byfield. I mean, I know that the Jets might be asking for it, but Vilardi makes a lot more sense as part of a package with a few pieces in it. Why would LA, unless now they've seen him obviously more than any of us have or watched him closer, unless LA is willing to say that Gabe Vilardi, the guy that they drafted second overall just a couple of years ago, that they're already throwing in the towel on him. That would be surprising to me, Dave.
You're talking about Byfield?
You're talking about Byfield. I don't think that LA is going to trade Byfield. If they had their
you said Vilardi,
choice
so I was like,
yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, look, I don't disagree with you, but you also have to be aware, this is a negotiation, right? And this is why you want Pat Brisson to be part of the game. This is why you want more. This is why you want this out in the media, quite frankly. And people are getting sick and tired of hearing from insiders and saying, well, I don't want to hear this. And the reality is, from a Jets perspective, if you're a Jets fan, You want these guys spreading. Colorado's in it. New York is in it. You want more, the more the merrier in this instance, because that only can drive up the price for Pierre-Luc Dubois. If it's only Montreal and then LA and they are a little tepid, they're dipping their toe in, your return isn't as significant. But if you can somehow convince the world that the Emperor is wearing clothes, that the New York Rangers are interested, the Boston Bruins are interested. If I'm Kevin Cheveldayoff, then when I'm talking to Rob Blake in LA, I get to say, well, Boston is interested. The New York Rangers are interested. It's not just Rob Blake knowing, well, look, Montreal is going to offer you nothing. So you're going to take what I'm in, these B-level prospects and uninteresting, an uninteresting trade from your perspective. And he's going to have to up his ante potentially. And look, as he's right, Pierre-Luc Dubois is an established center. You can say I don't think he's a $9 million center personally. I don't think he's close to a $9 million center, but I think that he is. I mean, it actually makes me sick to my stomach to think a guy who had 63 points is worth $9 million in the NHL.
Well, also, how can you, if you're Montreal, how can you sign him to more than Nick Suzuki, right? Like, I know people in Montreal like Dubois and they like the idea of having that size and skill up the middle, Dave, but you're right. I mean, especially, with Dubois' track record of being streaky, right? Let's be honest here. Like, he's a great player, but he's gone through stretches where he hasn't been a factor in games, right? So I think he's closer to that kind of $7 to $7.5 million range.
Yeah, and I would just add quickly as that. It's not like it's like anybody. When Mark Scheifele is your number one center and he's scoring all those goals and he's producing for the team and he's having that record-setting series against Nashville and he's only making $6 million. It's not like nobody else can sign a contract more significant than theirs. But you really have to say to yourself, it's great that that's what Pierre-Luc Dubois wants, and maybe a team will pay him that, and maybe. With the 8 years, they can structure it in a way that it's closer to that number, especially because the cap is expected to go up. And so he may want to have it, in that, with that perspective of, hey, look, in 3 years, maybe the cap goes up $5 million and I would have made more money. But again, so he's going to have to the team's going to have to expect that if the cap goes up, his number may be more reasonable based on 2 or 3 years. And that's something they'll have to eat in theory. And look, he's a young guy. He's turning 25. So it's not as if, even if you sign him to an 8-year deal, 33 is still reasonable if you're going to have this guy for what are the best prime years of his life. I mean, from a Jets perspective, again, I think it's about having that understanding when guys are in this situation, when they have the ability to be UFA, there's still a lot of opportunity for you, especially with the way things have transitioned from Montreal or bust to now having the Kings become a front runner. I think that gives you a lot more leverage to trade Pierre-Luc Dubois for assets that you're looking for.
There's no question that the ability that Pat Brisson, being involved and potentially being a broker here for multiple teams, or he's only the broker for his agent, but involving multiple teams is a boon to the Winnipeg Jets. There's no question about it, because had that not happened, had it been Montreal or bust, like you said, Dave, then the options for the Jets would have been significantly limited. They would have been a lot more up against the wall. And Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Jets organization, isn't free and clear yet. Don't get me wrong. They're not home free. They're not driving the bus on this one. They just have a little bit more opportunity. They have a little bit more leverage to be able to make this a little bit more palatable than it initially appeared a couple weeks ago when this officially came to light that it's coming to this trade situation. It's important for the Jets to be able to succeed on it, but it's also, you can't overplay your hand. You still don't have a good hand here, and you best not start getting arrogant thinking that you have this pocket twos I have is all of a sudden going to win me the big pot. It's not going to. Make the deal you can, the best deal you can, in my estimation, as quickly as you can.
Pocket twos actually isn't that bad in Texas Hold'em. You know that, Drew, but I thought you were going to say like 10-6 offsuit or something like that. But, the point was well made, Drew. But yeah, I hate to beat a dead horse here, guys, but I keep going back to LA, and is Philip Deneau not the perfect return for Pierre-Luc Dubois? 30 years old. He has, I think, 4 years left on his contract, or at least 3 years left on his contract. But to me, he's like the antidote to Mark Scheifele, right? Great offensive player, but also a great two-way center, right? So I don't think LA, at least the way Dennis Bernstein was talking on Winnipeg Sports Talk, it seems like they like Kopitar and Danault 1-2 up the middle. And then I guess that makes Pierre-Luc Dubois a third line center, or maybe that makes Philip Danault their third line center. Most likely it would be the latter, right? But I just think that's the type of player that I think you want to be getting, right? I talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, right, boys? Like, you want a guy that has some term, and you want some guy, if he doesn't have the term, you want some guy that has some team control. So that's why a guy like Gabe Vilardi, I think, is really intriguing. But again, I mean, you have that hole up the middle. Cole Perfetti has the ability to play center, but he's been used at the wing, on the wing primarily in the NHL, right? So I think, you know, when you're talking about LA, there's a lot of possibilities, but it's tough to really know with certainty who the Jets are after. I mean, I think you can, you know, kind of eliminated process of elimination who Chevy is asking for. It's most likely one of, you know, Byfield, Vilardi, or Philip Danault. He's obviously, you know, not going to be asking for Doughty or Kopitar, as we talked about, but LA is an interesting one. And I go back to Montreal and I wonder, you know, if anything has changed with Kent Hughes' offer, right? Because we've talked about it so many times. Like, there's only so many players that the Habs can trade. They're a young team, right? Like, Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield are signed long-term. They're not going anywhere.
Right.
I mean, the Jets aren't asking for, you know, Josh Anderson for Pierre-Luc Dubois, unless Anderson was part of a package. But I really,
let me tell you, Ezzy, I guarantee you they were thinking about, Montreal was saying, we'll give you Josh Anderson. We've only been trying to get rid of him for years. Take Josh Anderson.
And he's a decent player, a decent power forward. But I mean, you need, again, I go back to what we've been talking about for basically 2 months now, right? You're going to have a huge hole up the middle without Pierre-Luc Dubois. And who's going to fill that hole? Are you going to replace him in free agency? Because we haven't seen the Jets dip into the free agency waters a lot to sign centers, right? So right now, I mean, a Pierre-Luc Dubois deal seems imminent, but it's all speculation. And it's fun for us guys to talk about this, but it's just really, I feel like a lot of people are just, you know, putting 10 players on a wheel and spinning it. And then whichever, you know, however the wheel lands, you know, they're picking that player. So yeah, Brandt Clarke is a really promising defenseman, right shot defenseman, but I don't think the Kings want to trade him at all.
No, I mean, look, the Kings have so much young talent. They have a ton of young talent, but it's incumbent. I mean, they're not going to trade, I think, some of their bigger names. I don't think they're trading Quinton Byfield. I don't think they're trading Brandt Clarke. So if the Jets can do a Gabe Vilardi plus contract, you know, but not a contract that is, you know, a terrible contract that doesn't also work within your team and work within your roster.
You still have to sign Gabe Vilardi too, right?
Right, but he's an RFA and everything else. So I mean, yes, you have to sign him, but hopefully you would you'd be able to do that. I mean, I think when the Jets traded Jacob Trouba, they had to sign Neil Pionk. If you remember, he was I think that's when he signed a 2-year deal.
He was an RFA too. Yep.
He was an RFA. So I mean, again, let's assume for argument's sake that they'll be able to sign whomever they acquire from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, I agree with you, Ezzy. If I don't think that LA is all of a sudden going to trade you Philip Danault as well as Gabe Vilardi. But if they can trade you, you know, Gabe Vilardi and Victor Arvidsson, well, then the Jets might have something that's beginning to resemble a workable top 9. Yes, they're thin up the middle still, or you're hoping that, you know, Vilardi can step in and play a significant role up the middle when he hasn't necessarily been able to do so at the NHL level just yet. But, you know, at least you're getting some NHL caliber players back to solidify that top 9 group. And maybe you go more Kraken style, where you're, instead of having sort of the upper echelon, you're more just balanced all throughout your roster, Dave.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, that's a good point, Drew. And we've seen that work in Seattle. And look, their farm club right now is in their first year in the AHL, is right now in the finals against the Hershey Bears. I believe they're up 2 games to 1. They may have played last night. I'm not 100% certain. So Seattle's cooking. And Drew, sorry, you took down that comment, but I wanted to highlight it because I think it's an important one. I think it's an important point that our good friend Turd Ferguson is making.
Yes.
And because he says, of course, they don't want to trade their best prospects, LOL. But if you want to get into the class of the West, I do what you have to do. You have only so many chances to get the brass ring. And I think it's a good point. And I think the fact of the matter is, if you want to have Kopitar, Danault, and Dubois up the middle, which is going to be a hell of a 1-2-3 punch, however you configure it.
Yeah.
Then you are going to have to trade the big asset. You are going to have to, if that's what you want, if you want to be able to defeat the Edmonton Oilers when you play them and have that depth up the middle, that would make you an enviable team to play against next, or unenviable, I should say, clean team to play against next season, then that is something that you're going to have to consider. And again, that is why, if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, as much as Jets fans don't like hearing from the insiders spilling these little nugs here, there, and everywhere, that's why you want to hear, Boston's now in the ring, because suddenly now LA, who doesn't want to trade their A prospect, says, well, maybe we got to trade our A prospect because Boston's in the mix and we really want this player to help put us over the edge. Because again, ultimately, LA's got Doughty and they've got Kopitar.
Yeah.
And they know that this is kind of like, they have to decide, do they want to give these guys one last shot and help, do something that's going to help put them over the edge, right? And maybe they feel like, that with the signing of Gavrikov and with Korpisalo and net and Copley, good guys. Copley was good for them last year. He helped. I'm pretty sure. I don't know how many games he ended up playing last season.
That's
LA.
why I don't think they're going to re-sign Korpisalo. And apparently they do really want to sign Gabe Vilardi, right? So that's the issue here. Like we're talking about, right? Like we're talking about these players, but the Kings want to keep these players, right? And so, getting Pierre-Luc Dubois, as Dave talks about, makes you probably have the best center depth, similar to the Jets up the middle, right? When they had Scheifele, Stastny, Lowry, Little, right? If you have Kopitar, Philip Deneau, and Pierre-Luc Dubois, 1, 2, 3, that's pretty incredible, right?
It's incredible.
But you have to give up Gabe Vilardi. Yeah. Gabe Vilardi's a great player, right? And he just had his career season. So, again, I think Dave's right. I think if there are other teams that are seriously in it, and we know Chevy's been talking to teams, right? He's been talking to the Kings. He's been talking to, obviously, the Habs. And, you wonder how there could be a team that we haven't been talking about, right? Because apparently the report is that Pierre-Luc Dubois has fought. Pardon me?
There's always a dark horse team that
exactly
can come out of the
right.
woodwork.
So again, it's fun for us to talk about, and it's fun for Jets fans to speculate about the PLD for Byfield trade. But it's always a possibility that Dubois is traded for a goaltender and Hellebuck is traded for a center, I guess. But again, it's all speculation at this point. But one thing is for sure, guys, the clock is ticking, right? Like the draft is only 10 days away, and we're going to be previewing the draft later with Craig. But I mean, it's it's time to make that move if you're Chevy.
The time is, you're absolutely right, Ezzy. The time is quickly running through the hourglass, and he'll have to bleep or get off the pot before we know it. Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press is up next. You're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on a Saturday morning. Bottom of hour number one. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. We're pleased to welcome to the program from the Queen City of Regina. He's the king of all media. I don't think that's been taken by anyone else before. Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press joins us on the program. Mike, good morning. Is there any truth to the rumor that Janarian Grant is still dodging Rough Riders tacklers on his way back to the end zone?
First of all, guys, Howard Stern says hello.
Hey now.
I think he lays claims to the title of King of all media, but I'll take it. I like the king and the queen analogy there. The Bombers have been the kings of this Prairie rivalry, 8 straight wins. And Janarian Grant, my goodness, he dodged seemingly every tackle out there. Teammates were talking last night about they thought he stiff-armed every single player on the field. It was a run for the ages for sure. And what an emotional kind of few moments after the fact to see if it would stand. I don't obviously cover a ton of football. I was coming off the bench for this one, guys. A short yardage situation to fill in for Hammer and Taylor, who had other things on, the third stringer, if you will. But I don't know that I've seen in my football watching over my life where a penalty flag on a punt return gets challenged by the team that scored and then overturned. Like, it was pretty remarkable series of events. And really, when you look at how the game was playing out last night, it was the proverbial TSN turning point, right? It was a close game, gets broken open, and then the Bombers were kind of just like Janarian Grant off and running. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch live, I guess, unless you were one of the 29,000 plus wearing a watermelon helmet and a green jersey inside Mosaic. They didn't enjoy that nearly as much, I'm sure, as Bomber fans.
Yes, and our heart weeps for them, undoubtedly. Mike, obviously, we could talk a lot about the Bombers, but that would be a little bit odd given our topic of du jour usually.
Here, let me jump in. That would be the illegal block football
Nicely
show.
done. Well done. Excellent. You brought it all back together. The very, very punny. Well done. That's why you are the
king of all media.
Author, the king of all media, and the author of such fine prose. Well, we are not. How about that? Mike, talk about the Jets. I mean, it's now the Cup final is done. The Cup has been awarded. Congratulations to Vegas. I want to start with your column from earlier this week where you very much so compared and contrasted the approaches taken by the Vegas Golden Knights versus the approach taken by the Winnipeg Jets. And, you highlighted and you emphasized that not all players in the league have no move clauses that prevent them from getting traded to Winnipeg or prevent them from coming to Winnipeg. From the Jets' perspective, I mean, you've been vocal about this. We've been vocal about this, that the organization just seems to be too happy to be there as opposed to really trying to grab the cup on a yearly basis. Is it time for a rethink to their approach? Every team in the league drafts and develops. Every team has the right to pick in the first round, assuming they don't trade their pick away. Is it time for that sort of the Jets to almost get more aggressive and think more outside the box in how they approach roster building?
Oh, it absolutely is. And that was the main point of my column. Look, Winnipeg will never be Vegas in terms of, some of the off ice appeals for fans and for players, quite frankly, who maybe have a choice of where they go.
Mike, it's time for you to go to McPhillips Street Station and spend a little more time at the casino.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, it is. And I have spent a little bit of time in my younger years at the McPhillips Street Station. Playing the horse racing game, by the way. I'm not a big.
That was a good game.
I love that horse racing game. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good, fun game back in the day.
For sure. And when it comes to the NHL horse race, the Jets are kind of proverbial also-rans. And it was interesting to me because you have two guys in Cheveldayoff and Kelly McCrimmon who share a ton in common. Like, these guys go way back to the WHL days. They both played for the Wheat Kings. They're both Saskatchewan guys. They now both have Stanley Cups. Kevin Cheveldayoff won one as an assistant in Chicago. Now Kelly McCrimmon is kind of the lead guy in Vegas. But, how they approach their jobs couldn't be more different. Kevin Cheveldayoff is the very patient, very, very safe kind of moves. If you look at his trades he's made over his career, they're usually trades that were forced by situation, not necessarily trades, big swings. And look, Kelly McCrimmon and the Vegas Golden Knights as an extension, they've taken countless big swings. And have there been some misses? Absolutely. But it just seems their mindset is all about winning. There's no loyalty. It's cold-blooded. I said they run their business like the mob. Whereas the Jets kind of come across more as a mom and pop shop. And, again, I get that there's challenges Winnipeg may have in finding certain players. But I just think a more aggressive mindset would absolutely be the way to go. And you know what, guys, maybe we're going to see it this summer, not necessarily because that's how they drew it up, but because they have no other choice. But if they have to move the players we think they're moving, it is a big kind of reset that's coming, and it'll be interesting to see just how aggressive Kevin Cheveldayoff is.
Okay, Mike, so it's time for speculation station. All the rumors are out there right now with the LA Kings, right? Like Elliot Friedman, you saw that, that LA is really, on the tail of Pierre-Luc Dubois, and you hear the names, right? Quinton Byfield, Gabe Vilardi. I mean, do you think that
Luc Robitaille?
Exactly. Luc Robitaille, as far as not only was he one of the best left wingers in history, he's got a good relationship with Pat Brisson, right? So it's good on you to bring that up. But do you think Pierre-Luc Dubois is a member of the Jets by the time that the first round of the draft starts? Because it sure seems like a trade is imminent here.
I don't think he's a member of the Jets when the first round starts. And, the fact that they didn't file for team elected arbitration the other day was an interesting sign, because that would have taken the offer sheet potential. But it seems to me the Jets, they clearly aren't concerned about that. Now, is that because they don't think Pierre-Luc Dubois would sign the kind of offer sheet that would, with Montreal, for example, that would completely box them into a corner? There's been the talk about, anything around 6.4, right? And that would only bring a first and a third back, and then the Jets couldn't trade him. But clearly that's not a concern. And I think that is because they are far down the road. What is interesting, of course, is the idea that it's not just Montreal or bust. And that's a great development for the Jets if it's true. To be frank, guys, I wondered, and I guess part of me still wonders, if it isn't still Montreal or bust, and a lot of this is just a smokescreen. But I guess even if that's the case, if the end result is a bluff, if you will, that is driving the return up, if Montreal, for example, feels like, oh my goodness, we might not get this guy that wants to play for us and that we want, we better up our offer. I mean, if the end result benefits the Jets, then I that's a good thing, clearly. But yeah, it just seems the writing is on the wall, and it's inevitable that in the next, I guess, 12 days, as we sit here, 12 days until the or 11 days, I guess now, until the first round of the draft, we're going to see Pierre-Luc Dubois on the move. And the question now really is it Montreal? Is it Los Angeles? Is there another team? Certainly a team like the Rangers have been talked about as well. So for sure, just seems like a matter of time.
Mike McIntyre, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on this Saturday morning. Mike's appearance is brought to you by our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, and Zappia Group Realty.
Well, Mike, you talk about the Jets' hand being forced, and last week we were on air, and Pierre LeBrun, Michael Russo, and Eric Dehacek. So I'm not sure which of those three's nugget this was specifically, but they said
triple byline.
Exactly, and I quote: "There should be no confusion about whether Hellebuyck has interest in signing an extension in Winnipeg. That ship has sailed. His next contract will be with a new team." So, Mike, put on your Kevin Cheveldayoff hat. I don't know what kind of hat he wears. Hopefully it's an Illegal Curve one.
Fedora.
But whatever kind of hat he's wearing.
Probably more of a Philly hat guy, I think.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't think he's not like an Adam Lowry shop at a haberdashery kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, whatever hat you're wearing to think like Kevin Cheveldayoff, are you doing that in advance, like that? Because that's a big one. Oh, Expos.
Oh,
like
beauty.
Good. There you
that's
go.
a beauty. So you've got your hat on now.
Pierre-Luc Dubois, Montreal, right?
Yeah, that was supposed to be on for Ezzy's question, not mine. But maybe you think that he's going to go out to Quebec. I don't know. But anyways, what do you think the Jets are going to have to do? Because you're talking about their hands being tied. They obviously that's a big trade option or a big trade chit, if you will, for Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're the Jets, look, you don't, I guess, absolutely have to trade Connor Hellebuyck right now. He is under contract for one more year, whereas Pierre-Luc Dubois is an RFA who needs a new deal. But if you're the Jets, are you really going into next season knowing that you're not re-signing Hellebuyck because he doesn't want to re-sign? Are you going in and then moving him at the trade deadline? But then what happens if you're the Jets and you're comfortably in a playoff spot at the trade deadline? Are you trading your Vezina, caliber goaltender now in what would be seen as like a dump, a sell? It would create potentially a bizarre situation. So yeah, I mean, look, I think we all heard Connor Hellebuyck at the year exit meetings, and he's unlike, say, Pierre-Luc Dubois, who seems to have always kind of had his mind on not staying here very long. That wasn't always the case with Connor Hellebuyck. And I really think Connor Hellebuyck, if things had gone the way he would have liked in recent years, Connor Hellebuyck would be a Jet for life, because at the end of the day, it's not so much about who's signing his paychecks or what city he's living in. It's about what organization is taking a run at a Stanley Cup. And I think, they got so close to getting to the big dance in 2018. And then since then, they've won one playoff round. And I think Connor Hellebuck, who very candidly said, I'm running out of time. And so that's why I don't think we're going to see Connor Hellebuck like go to a team that is a few years away from being a few years away. Like, he's not chasing the money. It's not a money situation. I suspect the Jets would open the vault. It just is kind of another indictment, like we've seen from several players who've come and gone. Paul Stastny, I want to go to a contender. The writing seems to be on the wall that the guys that are here, core guys, they don't see the Winnipeg Jets as competing for a Stanley Cup anytime soon. And so they want to go somewhere that is. And Connor Hellebuck, given all that he's accomplished, that's the one trophy that he really wants to get his hands on. And so I'm not surprised. And again, does it happen before the draft? Not necessarily, but a Connor Hellebuck trade seems inevitable.
Mike, given the way the season ended for the Winnipeg Jets and the sniping back and forth and the players led by Blake Wheeler refusing to take what I would describe as acceptable accountability for the Game 5 performance, how can the Jets bring Blake Wheeler back into that dressing room with Rick Bowness still as head coach? Or from your perspective, is Wheeler done here in Winnipeg and it's just a matter of time now until that becomes official?
Well, I really thought we'd seen the last of Blake Wheeler. In fact, I would have put the odds at about 98% after the season. But I must say, guys, some of the things that have kind of happened since the team nominating for the King Clancy, Blake Wheeler this very weekend being on a fishing trip with fans. Blake Wheeler is set to play in the Manitoba Open in August. And did you see the contest that was announced the other day?
Yes.
Behind the scenes with Blake Wheeler at a game next year. Like, he's being trotted out as the face of the team still. And so, is this all a player subject to change? I think the fishing trip had that little addendum, but the player didn't change. It's still Blake Wheeler. So I really don't know, guys. I mean, it would seem to be a foolish move, and almost as, or maybe more concerning than the whole Bowness versus Wheeler year-end stuff was what we heard from many players after Blake Wheeler, who still referred to him as the pseudo captain of this team, as the alpha dog, as the leader. And to me, if you're really trying to shift the culture and change the room, as long as Blake Wheeler is still in that room, it seems like that is not going to happen. And so do they ride it out for one more year with him? It's certainly starting to look that way. And, I'm probably more around 50-50 now, whereas, like I said, a few weeks ago, I would have been absolutely he's done, whether it's a buyout or a trade where they eat salary. He's not coming back, but I'm starting to wonder.
Well, we say, because we hear it from other players who've left, that there's a problem in the room. Do you think that the management of the Jets think there's a problem in the room? Because whatever we say and whatever we think and whatever we hear from others, they wear such blinders really all the time that maybe they still think, that they are the meme of the house on fire and the dog sitting at the table.
Despite the fact that presumably they've now had a third different coach who has reported back to management and ownership about what he's seen.
Mm-hmm.
And, and look, we heard Rick Bowness. This was a guy who in very short time was at his wit's end with some of these guys. And was he blasting Blake Wheeler for the playoffs? Of course not. Blake Wheeler actually had a really good playoffs for the Jets. Blake Wheeler is one of the few guys that kind of looked like he gave a damn and was leaving it all out there.
Mm-hmm.
But Rick Bowness is around this team way more than any of us, obviously, and sees and hears things we don't. I can't imagine that they would be immune to what seems so apparent to all of us and anybody that follows this team. But I don't know. I mean, is it more an indictment of Mark Scheifele? Like, do they think if they move Mark Scheifele this summer and bring Blake Wheeler back, that it's going to be a different kind of room? I don't know. It's like so much with this organization. You're really left to wonder if everyone's on the same page and if everyone's watching the same thing that you are.
Just getting away from the Jets here, Mike, for a second. You're rocking the Spos hat. Obviously, the Spos left in early 2000. Drew would know the exact year, maybe 2004, 2005. I forget the exact year, but we got to talk about the Winnipeg Ice, because obviously this was a story that you had reported on, and weren't able to get clarity in terms of the arena situation, the ownership situation, and obviously super disappointing news for Winnipeg sports fans, right? Especially fans of junior hockey, specifically WHL hockey. And I think you'd agree that, coming off of a year in which they almost got to the Memorial Cup, if it wasn't for the Seattle Thunderbirds, they would have won the WHL championship. You had set, Zach Benson, top 10 prospect for the 2023 draft, Connor Geekie, first round pick. I mean, the list of high-end prospects that the Ice had it was a big list, right? In your opinion, is this just a situation where the ownership wasn't able to figure out how to build a new arena? Like, it just seems like, this was such an opportunity wasted. And a year ago, I don't think many people saw this coming, the Ice leaving after 4 years for Washington.
Well, first of all, Ezzy, I know you've been accused at times of being in the dark, but you're really taking it to a new level today. I assume it's Ezzy.
Hold on, Mike. I'll just move a little bit. Hold on.
There we go. I
recognize
the voice, but it was.
Is that better?
Yeah,
no, go back to the dark. It was better the other way.
There we go.
And where'd your beard go, Ezzy?
It's a little bit. Yeah, I shaved it off, Mike. It's a little. Actually, it's not that bad out here, but it's a little overcast in Lac du Bonnet.
Clearly, yeah. I mean, it talk about things that seemed inevitable. It's kind of the worst kept secret, I think. And we had heard in the last few weeks that, like, employees with the team had been told, go find other jobs. But nobody was talking. I mean, there was a rumor a week or so ago that actually the Vancouver Canucks were interested in acquiring the Ice and perhaps trying their own version of a three-headed hockey monster. They already own the Canucks, obviously, in the Abbotsford Heat. But I guess if there was a surprise, it's where the Ice have moved. And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the city.
Washington State. That's all you need to say.
Yeah. A little bit of a surprise in where they ended up. But, I think that's a great comment by Wrench Doozer, Ezzy in the podcast protection program. I like it.
I've assumed a different identity.
Yes. But, it is unfortunate because they obviously brought an exciting brand of hockey, and these were kind of the glory days for that organization. Like, we saw a lot of great young players that we're going to see probably for years in the NHL. And, they had what ended up being their swan song was over 11,000 fans watching those two playoff games against the Thunderbird. That, and I wrote at the time of that playoff series, I wondered if that opened the door to some kind of partnership potentially with True North. And, for all those people that say, well, why wouldn't True North let them play in their rink, or why, they're competitors. The Ice were trying to compete with the Manitoba Moose. And so, of course, it would be like Coke helping out Pepsi. But, I think they found some synergy to make that one-time kind of deal work. But it wasn't probably going to work in the long run. And at the end of the day, the promises made when they moved here 4 years ago of building a standalone facility never came to fruition. And so they couldn't keep playing in a building where 1,800 fans was going to be the max. That was less than what they were drawing, before they moved here. So I think we all knew they were running out of time. And it's unfortunate for sure, because I think there is a market for that kind of hockey in this city, and unfortunately, it no longer exists.
And Mike, going back to the Jets and the summer ahead for the organization, and we can talk about the on ice responsibilities, but there's off ice responsibilities as well. I mean, before the playoffs began, they unveiled their big marketing campaign to get some fans back in the seats. You're seeing a lot of advertising right now from the Jets. I mean, I think one of the things that people tend to forget with the COVID years is that there was a disconnect between the team, the players being in the community. We're seeing a development camp for the first time in 4 seasons. I think that goes a long way to, allowing fans to connect with the young prospects and seeing them up close and personally right after the draft. But from an organization's perspective, while you're out there trying to galvanize your base and you're trying to, get those fans to buy season tickets, pony up their dollars, I think people will do that even if the team is taking a quote step back and retooling. But do you not think that it's incumbent on the organization from Kevin Cheveldayoff to put out the vision, he doesn't have to lay his cards out to the other GMs and say, this is exactly the moves I plan on making. But don't you think there's an organizational responsibility when you're trying to sell the game to the fans that we have a vision, we have a plan?
Oh, absolutely, Dave, especially in a hockey savvy market like we have in Manitoba. The fans are not stupid. Mm-hmm. They see what's going on. And the fact of the matter is when the GM of the team speaks a total of 4 times during an entire season, from training camp to exit day, which is how many times Kevin Cheveldayoff spoke, when the owner and chairman never speaks about hockey matters. Mark Chipman's made a couple of recent appearances to talk about downtown revitalization and the Portage Place deal, but you never see him talk about the hockey team that he's heavily involved with. And for viewers out there, guys, that's not for a lack of trying on the media's part. Believe me, that's the way they want it. That's the way they like it. And maybe that worked when the team was selling itself and the building was always full, win or lose. I don't know that works in 2023 when we're coming off a year with an average of 1,300 plus empty seats every game. And like you said, Dave, what is the vision and long-term plan? And so, I agree. I think we should be hearing that. And look, I have no doubt we might hear from Kevin Cheveldayoff 4 times this summer alone, just because there's probably going to be a bunch of moves that necessitate where the GM kind of has to talk, right? We'll hear from him obviously coming up at the draft. If we don't hear from him sooner because he's moved Pierre-Luc Dubois or another player. But I think, the next time we do hear from him, I'd expect to hear a lot of questions from myself and media colleagues about the vision and the plan. And I think that's a theme that is going to continue here for the foreseeable future, because it's incumbent on the Jets to share with their market, with their consumers, what exactly they're doing here.
Mike, last question for you. What's more likely? We're rapidly approaching the date where Mark Scheifele could sign a contract extension. From your perspective, what's more likely? That contract extension gets signed in Winnipeg, or he gets traded away from the Winnipeg Jets?
I do think it's more likely he gets traded away from the Winnipeg Jets. And, part of me wonders, unlike, say, Pierre-Luc Dubois, who I suspect the Jets would absolutely, if he wanted to commit here long-term, the Jets would be all in on that. Same with Connor Hellebuyck. I'm not as convinced that that's the mindset with Mark Scheifele. Now, I'm sure, again, we talk about the loyalty of True North. There's no question there would be some who would love the idea of Mark Scheifele being a lifer, a guy that, their first ever draft pick of the 2.0 era. Mm-hmm. But I think, we go back to management and ownership and whatnot, maybe being aware of issues. We saw, issues again with Mark Scheifele last season, now with a 3rd different coach, I guess a 4th different coach, if you go back to to Claude Noel, although Mark Scheifele wasn't really in the fold on any kind of regular basis back then. But, we saw Rick Bowness, and there's no question that a lot of Rick Bowness's frustration was over Mark Scheifele.
Mm-hmm.
He benched him that game. I think we were in Carolina for that. And, it seemed to be at his wit's end. So I got to think Rick Bowness has been in the ear of Kevin Cheveldayoff, probably saying, like, this just isn't working. Now, and we've heard teams like Carolina linked to Mark Scheifele. And I do wonder, like, would a guy like Rod Brindamore be good for Mark Scheifele? Is a change of scenery maybe best for everybody here? And so I do think it's more likely, guys, that just like probably Pierre-Luc Dubois and Connor Hellebuck, Mark Scheifele has played his last game as a Winnipeg Jet. But again, you don't have to necessarily move him right away. You could hold on. He is under contract one more year. We talk about the trade deadline. Could you get more from Mark Scheifele at the trade deadline, or as much maybe as you would now? Again, unlike Pierre-Luc Dubois, because of his age and the idea that he only wanted to go to Montreal, I don't know if there's the same urgency with Scheifele in terms of finding a fit right now. Maybe you could be a little more patient, but it's just one of the many, many, many questions surrounding this team that maybe we'll start to get some answers between now and 2 weeks from now when free agent frenzy kicks off. This has the chance, guys, to be two of the biggest weeks in Jets history when we look back, July 1 or July 2 on where we were versus where we are. It could be seismic, absolutely.
I lied, Mike. I got one more for you.
Yes.
You mentioned Rick Bowness and, the frustration that's evident on his face at various times throughout last year, and the fact that you presumably would think that his message is being sent up the ladder at True North. But if those changes don't come to fruition, if his words fall on deaf ears, could you foresee a situation where he takes a proverbial walk in the snow and decide that he doesn't need this, and the Jets could theoretically be looking for another head coach at a very unexpected juncture of the offseason?
I'd like to think it would be more of a walk in the fallen leaves, Ezzy, because we better not have snow on the ground by the time the season starts this year. But sure, I mean, look, I asked Rick Bowness when he met with us, after the players had kind of ripped him publicly. And I said flat out, like, why are you coming back? And I meant it, like, because I really wondered. It wasn't just a question for the sake of a question. At that point, I really was wondering, why don't you just go retire? Like, it's got to be way less stressful than dealing with what must feel like a bit of a nursery school at times in this environment. You're almost 69 years old. You had health issues this year with COVID. Like, why do you need this? And Rick Bowness gave a very impassioned answer about how much, he loves the game and being around it. And I get that. It's infectious. It's hard to walk away from. That being said, I got to think that if how last year ended, if there's more of the same on tap to start, I don't know. I got to think if you're Rick Bowness, you'd be reevaluating your lot in life and maybe looking for the exit door. That being said, I don't think he's a quitter per se. I think, he's a guy who's seen a lot over his lifetime and his hockey career. Does he think that he could, find another way with the same group? Maybe. I mean, there's no question the Jets for a few months last year anyways, they were flying pretty high. And then it all fell apart because so many bad habits crept in, and players reverted to doing the sorts of things that drive coaches in, just up the wall. So we'll see. But it's another potential kind of subplot here. If they do try and run it back, I just think, guys, we're not likely to be dealing with that situation because I just find it hard to believe that they would be able to try and run it back. To me, that would almost be malpractice, given the state of affairs right now.
Mike McIntyre is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. You also write a game story or two, as he did last night in Regina, covering the Bombers defeating the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Mike, thanks for this. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you again real soon, buddy.
You bet, guys. Take care.
And Mike, hold on, just before you go here, keep your schedule open second, maybe third week of July after free agency, after the draft, for the first Illegal Curve Invitational out here at Granite Hills, because we got Jay Bell who's interested, and we'll get Dave out here, maybe Drew if you want to do 5, but
first
for
I've
sure,
I've heard of it.
Me, you, Jay, and Dave will hit up Granite. Okay.
I like it, guys. I like it. Absolutely. I'm wide open. I'm at your disposal.
There you go. Kenny Weeb not invited though, no matter what. Kenny
No,
Weeb's
he's
not
too
invited.
good. He's too good. We need a bunch of sandbaggers.
That's right. We need guys who want the beer part of the thing more than
Right.
anything.
Ruben, want to say hi to Mike?
Thank you. Oh,
Say
we
hi
got
to
kids
Mike.
involved now.
And everybody watching.
Bye, Mike. Thank you, buddy.
You just brought the average age of this group down about 25 years, I think. Good
Yeah,
stuff.
no
Yeah,
question.
Ruben's turning 4 pretty soon. 2 more months.
There
Right
you
on.
go.
Take
Bye,
care.
Mike. Thanks. Bye. There he goes, Mike McIntyre from the Winnipeg Free Press, joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. When we come back, more Jets talk. We'll cover Connor Hellebuck, more on Pierre
on the hockey show.
Shifley, Wheeler, Ruben, hopefully not Ezra, Drew and Dave. It's Saturday morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this beautiful Saturday morning. I'll be honest, I have no idea if it's beautiful out or not, but let's assume it
Beautiful
is
out here in the Eastman region, I can tell you that.
Okay, well, then I got some thumbs up and some affirmations that it is beautiful indeed. So that's always good to hear. Reminder, this segment of the show is brought to you by our friends of the Rady JCC, Betway, and Tough Duck. The Rady JCC Sports Dinner goes this coming Monday. Chris Chelios, Jeremy Roenick, Ed Belfour, and all 3 members of Illegal Curve will be live in person. If you haven't already got your tickets, get them now. Literally, time is running out to see those 3 legendary members of the Chicago Blackhawks. Tickets available, radyjcc.com. We're going to be there. Come say hi to us if you happen to be there as well. Ginsburg will be the clean-shaven one. But speaking of somebody, I ran into a celebrity yesterday, guys. If you don't mind, if I have a second here, I can show off the celebrity that I was able to run into while I was on the golf course yesterday. Let's see if this works. Hopefully it will. Maybe it won't. I don't know. My screen's not there. Look at that. Look at that handsome man I ran into yesterday. Look at all that handsomeness on one picture. I happened to be on the golf course yesterday, and look who I stumbled upon. None other than Spency himself.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Exactly. The man, the myth, the legend. It was great. It's the first time I've had the opportunity to meet Spency in person. And so I certainly could not pass up that opportunity. But look at that.
Spencer, though, he's met 2 of the 3 members of Illegal Curve, but not the one.
I was going to say, it's a little bittersweet. You know, you sent us that picture yesterday afternoon. I don't know if you just mentioned that, but from Glendale Golf Course. Happy 70th birthday to Stuart Leibel, by the way. Yes. But I haven't met Spency yet, and he's my spirit animal. So, I mean, Spency, we got to, you know what? I'm just going to send you my number, and we're going to go out and have some fun. Maybe go bowling, maybe go catch a movie, maybe go for a whole meal of food, whatever. But love it, Drew. Love Spency. Big fan of the IC Hockey Show and post-game show, and more importantly, friend of the program.
Well, you know, I wasn't certain I thought it was him when I saw the big beard, but I'm like, hey, I hollered over to him, and, you know, both of us were clearly working hard. I don't want to say which one of the 2 of us was working harder than the other, but, you know, I hollered over to him, like, I just want to make sure that he was the Spencer Sutton that watches the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on the regular, and he was, so I had to snap the photo. So it was great.
Dave, that's almost like too much sexy man for one picture. You know what I mean? Like, that's a lot of handsomeness right there.
There's a lot of handsomeness going on in that photo, but I had to share it with the audience because you never know when you're going to run into a real celebrity in the wild, like I had the opportunity to yesterday, and grab a photo.
Spency is like the 4th member of Illegal Curve. Like, Richie's gone now. He's got kids. He's a pro scout. Spency is now the quad member of IC.
Yeah, there you go. So I had to share that photo while we had a little brief interlude here on the program. Craig Button, of course, is still going to join us at the bottom of the hour. The NHL draft coming up in about 10 days, 11 days. First round coverage of the draft, of course, will be back here on our YouTube channel. Dave and Ezzy are going to drive the bus.
And friends.
And friends.
What's going on there, Drew? How come you're not doing it? You always host the draft show. What's happening?
I do. Unfortunately, I have a family obligation that night that has inconveniently been scheduled without necessarily. No, not that at all. But I have a family obligation. Maybe I'll be able to pop in for the last couple of picks. But we
might send you the link, Drew, but don't bet on it.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. You don't have to send me the link. I won't be able to answer it anyways. But I know that it will be in the good hands of all you good folks. But we have a lot to get to and a lot to talk about before we get to draft day Wednesday coming up. And of course, remember, free agency. I love you too, Spency. Thanks for the money.
$2.79, by the way, is for Spency. He just bought me a Big Bite hot dog from 7-Eleven.
But of course, 2 weeks from today, the start of free agency, Canada Day, July 1st. Wouldn't expect the Jets to be big players on free agency. They rarely are, but of course, we will still have the Illegal Curve Hockey Show live Canada Day, July 1st, 9 a.m. So join us before you start your Canada Day celebrations in a couple of weeks.
It's going to be tough. Last year's Kentucky broadcast from the woods and from the darkness, and the Rutger McGroarty interview after the Jets took him in the first round, and also all the drama with the first 4 picks, right? Everybody remembers Shane Wright slipping to the Seattle Kraken, but it's going to be fun. I mean, you're hearing comparisons. It's funny, Dave, because, you know, we used to go to the drafts. We haven't in a while. Remus will be there, so make sure you are subscribed to Winnipeg Sports Talk and watching those guys all next week. But the 2003 draft, last time it was in Nashville, we know how good that draft was with Eric Stahl, Patrice Bergeron. Pretty sure Zach Parise was that year. It was a really good draft.
Well, and just quickly mentioning, since we're talking about the 2022 draft briefly, we can mention that Fabian Wagner, the Jets' sixth rounder out of Sweden, coincidentally, where I think my brother will be tomorrow for my niece's birthday.
Can you leave him in Sweden?
I can't, but he's going. He's taking my niece. Shout out early. Happy birthday to Riley for her birthday. They'll be there tomorrow. So, but Fabian Wagner, the sixth rounder from 2022, he signed his 3-year ELC. He'll play in Sweden next year. It's interesting because the Swedish Hockey Federation and the NHL signed a new agreement for like
a player transfer agreement.
The transfer agreement it's an 8-year agreement they signed in 2022, and essentially it means that guys, the age for anyone who's not a first round pick can be sent to the AHL, but anybody who's not, essentially it's the idea is you're allowing them to develop in Sweden and not over here in North America. And so the age went from 21 to 24, but I mean, the team you can ask the team to release them, and of course the player can be released. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's just a way to kind of keep guys developing in Sweden. But regardless, the Swedish, I believe he's a winger. He might be a center actually, but he is he a winger? Oh, he's a winger. Okay, as he's giving me the winger. So I think they might have had him.
He might play both.
It's funny because no,
Hockey DB has him listed as a center, but I'm pretty sure he plays both.
I was going to say, because it's funny because as he was giving me the nod, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I could have sworn when I wrote about him, I read that it was a center. But I mean, I'm not up to date with the Swedish Hockey League and what's going on over there as much as we do focus here as on some of the other leagues. But regardless, he signed, and he's and again, the more important note that came from that was Jets development camp is back. So last year, of course, was the first year, the first non-COVID year that they could have done it, but because of the Summer World Juniors, they felt that there wasn't a need to bring those guys in. Yeah. So they and of course they'd seen Daniel Torgerson, Henry Nikkinen at the end of the year with Moose, so they didn't necessarily feel the need to have a prospect camp. This year, of course, they're going to be doing it. And I think, like I said to Mike in my question to him, I think it is a good way for fans to connect with these young prospects and for the young prospects to get familiar with the city. So I think it's an important week here in Winnipeg coming up July 4th to the 8th.
Let me ask you guys, we talked about it with Mike a few minutes back, but let me ask you guys, what do you think about the team sort of trotting out Blake Wheeler front and center the last little bit for a bunch of different promotions and a bunch of different public relations, meet the players and blah, 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 fishing trips. He's on that fishing trip with Andrew Ladd and Wheeler on that fishing trip with a fan.
When did the Jets reacquire Andrew Ladd, by the way? Like, I realized that Ladd was the former captain of the Jets, but it's kind of random to see Andrew Ladd there. Obviously, Ladd and Wheeler are good buddies, and as I just mentioned, he was the former captain. But look, Drew, I mean, it definitely doesn't make you think that the Jets are going to be buying him out, which a lot of people were speculating, right? You saw Oliver Ekman-Larsson was bought out by the Vancouver Canucks, right? So Jets fans were curious to see if maybe the Jets were going to buy Wheeler out. And, we talked about it. I mean, the likelihood of that happening was, 50-50? I don't think, you could say with certainty that the Jets were going to buy him out. That's a lot of money, right? And if you look at what Ekman-Larsson, by the way, he's going to get $17 or $18 million, Dave, just to go play for another team, right? Because you got to assume.
I think it's actually 19, Ezzy.
Yeah, so $19 million. So that's a pretty nice buyout. And then obviously the Canucks get the cap space. But back to what you were asking, though, Drew, I mean, it certainly, seems at this point that, Wheeler's going to play out his last year with the Jets. And it didn't seem likely after the way the season ended, the Jets losing to the Golden Knights and all of the comments between him and Rick Bowness, right? So, I mean, he could obviously still be traded, but I don't know why you would be showcasing him this much at these events if you were going to trade him.
The only silver lining I could think of, Ezzy, is that we've seen evidence of the hockey side and the business side not being on the same page for the Winnipeg Jets, where, the business side is off doing things like the horrible launch of that season ticket campaign, and really there not being a cohesive strategy or a cohesive plan involved, because it is utterly bizarre to me that you have Blake Wheeler in this position, because I personally have been waiting since the Cup final ended and then the buyout window opens. I've been sort of waiting for that announcement, but now I don't think it's necessarily coming. And it's just such an inconceivable decision when it comes to Blake Wheeler. And I don't, look, and again, this is strictly based on not even his on-ice performance anymore. It's just based on the fact that at a point in time, you need to turn the page. You need to move on. He's had his time here. He can leave with his head up high. He's carried himself with the utmost of dignity and class in terms of how he's interacted and carried himself off the ice. Has his leadership style been in question? Sure, but you can't say that he hasn't given his all for this team. But it just needs to move on. And I've been saying this, honestly, week in and week out, yet the organization just refuses to move on and close the book on this chapter of the Winnipeg Jets, Dave.
No, I mean, look, I agree with you. I wasn't certain. I thought, well, it's a little unusual that he is literally departing for northern Manitoba to go on a fishing trip. And today's the day the buyout window opens. And I thought, that's going to make it a little bit uncomfortable. I don't think they'll probably do something like that. I mean, obviously, Blake Wheeler lives in Winnipeg, so he is, or has a place, I should say, year round here in Winnipeg, and he's got kids, so the kids are probably still in school until this week, or next week.
Coached against Blake Wheeler a year ago.
But my point is that these guys, he's one of the guys who
soccer,
stays in the
by the way,
city.
we mentioned it was soccer.
Yes, but he's one of the guys who stays in the city and is available for these types of things, like the fishing trip, and obviously a lot of this stuff is subject to change. But I look, I had a lot of people send us via DM that the contest for the season, because I thought, look, the players can decide they want him to be the King Clancy nominee or whatever it's going to be. But the fact of the matter is that the fact that they're doing a contest for next season for Blake Wheeler. Like that to me is you don't do that by accident. The Jets aren't the Jets aren't Apple. There's not 17,000 employees and nobody knows what's going on, over here and over there. And it's completely independent ships. So the fact of the matter is that, something like that is run up the tree and it has to be decided. And I'm not saying Kevin Cheveldayoff is going to get involved in that sort of marketing campaign. Obviously, I don't think he is, but at the end of the day, that has to go to someone who says, well, I'll check with so-and-so to see if that's a feasible option. Right. Clearly they said it is. And again, that can always change. It doesn't have to necessarily be, this, that, or it doesn't have to be, it's not locked in stone, but it definitely creates more of a disbelief that you're moving on from number 26. And again, I'm on record as saying, and I know Mike was on our show saying he thinks all four could be on the move, Ezzy. I really think that Hellebuyck is on the move. I think 80's on the move in Dubois. I think Scheifele, I actually disagree with Mike. I actually think Scheifele, to answer Drew's question,
I agree with you,
more likely to sign a long-term extension on July 1st and be the face of this franchise. And I think that I'm leaning towards Blake Wheeler staying based on what the signs we're seeing.
I think I agree with Mike, actually. I think Scheifele is going to be traded, and it looks like Wheeler is going to be the only one of the core four who's left. The original Atlanta Thrasher, or at least the last remaining Atlanta Thrasher, right? And Wheeler's different than
the
all
Jets
of these
still
players.
on the rights to Ivan Talagan.
Yeah, exactly. And Spencer Mahachik. But I mean, Hellebuyck has 1 year left on his deal. And obviously Wheeler has 1 year left on his deal, but he's at the end of his career. This could be his last year, or at the very least, Dave, it's going to be, maybe a couple more seasons after this year, right? So Scheifele, Dubois, Hellebuyck, those guys you have to trade if you're not going to sign them to extensions, as opposed to Wheeler, who you obviously, if you do re-sign him, it's going to be to a shorter term contract, right? So it appears right now that the Jets management views Wheeler as a guy that they want to keep, and they're going to make their moves. And you have to wonder if part of the reason why he's not going to be moved is because you plan on moving Scheifele, Dubois, and Hellebuyck, and you want Wheeler, who's been here since day one, to be here. I'm not saying that rationale is right, Drew.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you're going to be putting Blake Wheeler in these contests and he's going to be playing in a golf tournament, I don't know when that is, if it's August or when exactly that golf tournament is. But, I mean, you're not going to trade a guy or buy out a guy who's going to be representing your organization in these various events, right? So, we can talk all day about how the Jets should move on from Wheeler, but it's starting to look like Wheeler's going to play out his last year of his contract with the Jets.
It goes back to another question, that another point we made with Mike. I honestly don't know if the Jets hierarchy believes that there's a culture problem. I mean, because if you thought there was a culture problem and you thought that culture problem is significantly impacting your success, doesn't it stand to reason you would look to try and change that culture? And I don't believe that culture is the problems with that culture are Pierre-Luc Dubois primarily. I mean,
Right.
Pierre-Luc
But you also
Dubois,
can't say that it's Blake Wheeler primarily,
but-
right? Like he's part of it, but you can't say it's him primarily either, right? I mean, we know that, you know, Mark Scheifele's play on the ice, his body language. I mean, it's again, you know, Blake Wheeler has been part of the leadership group for this team for a long time here. But again, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, Drew, that he's part of the old guard. But again, you know, we talked to Mike about this, you know, just half an hour ago. Wheeler was one of their best forwards in that first round series against the Golden Knights. And I think that means something.
Well, look, he was, and he deserves credit for that, which is why I think it was so disheartening. And I've said this, you know, really since the playoffs ended, to see him come out and make the comments he made at the end of after Rick Bowness made his comments, Dave. It's just, you know, if he's the first face being trotted out, then he's still, and the players themselves said it, he's still the driving force in that room. And that the team has not succeeded. So if the team has not succeeded, it stands to reason, at least in my, you know, logical working order of operations, if you want to use a math reference, is you would do something that to change the driving force there. But the team seems to continue to bring him back. And it's not like his voice is going to be diminished. It's clear now. They tried to diminish his impact by taking away the captaincy, and it didn't work. He's still the driving force. He's still the pulse of the team based on what the other players say. And that's not going to change this coming year. If he's still in the room, he's still going to be the driving force, Dave.
Well, and again, the idea of moving on and creating a new captain is going to be super awkward because you're going to be like, okay, you're the captain, even though you literally just went and said everybody else is the captain. Like everybody, on the team said Blake Wheeler's the captain. So it leads itself to an uncomfortable situation. But at the end of the day, look, these guys are pro athletes and they're getting paid millions of dollars to play a game. So while I understand that this is a problem, sometimes you just have to just put that stuff behind you and figure out a way. If that's your reality, that's your reality. And look, we don't know the conversations that are happening behind the scenes between ownership and the general manager, because it's not necessarily that they're on the same page in that regard. We don't know what that looks like. So it could be that one is advocating for a move towards a buyout. Maybe one is saying, don't do the buyout, you know, and ultimately one has the final say. And again, Drew, that goes to your idea of having some insulation and maybe having a president of hockey operations there to assist in that regard. But ultimately, it just seems to me like, regardless of what you think should happen, it seems to me that the current state of the Winnipeg Jets, if I was doing our Betway, bet right now, I would say that I think, first guy gone is Pierre-Luc Dubois. Second guy gone is Connor Hellebuck. Mark Scheifele signing a long-term extension, and the Jets are going to start with Blake Wheeler. I'm not saying they're going to finish the year with Blake Wheeler, but I think they're going to start the year with Blake Wheeler and potentially, depending on how things go, potentially move on from it.
Well, I mean, if they start the year with Blake Wheeler and then they end up not without Blake Wheeler, I think it's safe to assume that the season has gone off the rails.
Sure.
Because,
well, if you're not going to have Connor Hellebuck, and if you're not going to have Connor Hellebuck and you're still going to have the same defensive structure,
right?
I mean, you're right away losing at least 10 to 15 wins, Drew.
Yeah, Vegas can run Adin Hill to a cup when you have that defense in front of him. The Jets cannot do the same with whomever their goalie is next season, Mackenzie Blackwood or Tristan Jarry, or
could be Adin Hill.
It could be. I mean, whomever it is.
Laurent Brossoit.
He's a pending UFA, by the way.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't matter if the Jets
Adin Hill.
defense...
I mean, it was reported that by Jesse Granger that he thinks it's going to be Logan Thompson and Laurent Brossoit next year for Vegas.
That Adin Hill will. Well, I mean, and isn't that
Adin Hill's obviously going to get a huge raise, right? When you win a Stanley Cup.
But that's perfect. That's Vegas in a nutshell. Thank you very much. You got us the cup. We've won. We want to continue to win. You're not in our picture. We'll move you along. And fans, might be, fans don't care. Banners fly forever. Adin Hill will end up somewhere. He'll have a lot of money in his pocket. It'll be fine. And the Golden Knights will say Logan Thompson and Laurent Brossoit. Hopefully you can achieve the same for us next season.
If the Kings can't get Hellebuck, Adin Hill makes a lot of sense for them as well.
Yeah, they can bring back Jonathan Quick while they're at it. I don't think that's happening. Craig Button, Up next, talk about the draft, talk a little bit more about the Jets, much more to come. Saturday morning, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Saturday morning, you're back with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. Thrilled that so many of you are spending your Saturday morning with us as well. I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Betway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, our friends at Seagram's, Rollies Transfer, Grid Park, and The Keg, among all the other sponsors we've mentioned earlier on in the program. Also want to remind you, the NHL schedule will be coming out sometime in the next couple of weeks. It's usually right around before free agency, I think, is usually when the schedule will come out, hopefully. And then at that point in time, I'm going to sit down with our good friend Andrew at Boston Pizza, and I'm going to circle some dates on the calendar, and he's going to circle some dates on his calendar. And then we're going to share those dates with all of you good folk, because those are going to be the dates that we are live at Boston Pizza for the Illegal Curve post-game show. Live on location editions of the Illegal Curve post-game show throughout the upcoming 2023-24 NHL season. Just as soon as we have those dates confirmed, we will pass on that information to you good folks so that you know where to be and when to be there. Spency is already drinking fish bowls in lead up to it. He's like a marathoner building up his tolerance, and then he's going to be tapering in the week before the event, and then he's going to get back on the horse and drink those fish bowls. Kenny's water bottle will be there. It'll be a party at our local Boston Pizzas.
Boys, I can't believe we're talking about next year already. It's early June. I guess it's mid-June now.
Oh, you gotta prime the pump, Ezzy, as you know so well from your days. Prime the pump, get people excited, things of that nature. Get them anticipating the dates on the calendar, like I'm anticipating the month of August rolling around, so I don't have to spend as much time with the two of you for that beautiful 5-week window where we all go our separate ways and don't communicate with one another. It's always very much a delightful time for all of us, where we just sort of turn off our phones and block our numbers from one another, and then come back rejuvenated again in September. Good friend Craig Button set to join us coming up momentarily, talk about the upcoming NHL draft, where we know, that there's not a lot of intrigue up at the top of the draft. I would say the most intriguing of the players is Matvei Michkov out of the KHL, a guy who's tantalizing with his talent, but there is questions about when he would be eligible to come over to the NHL, given he has a contract in Russia still, and when he's next going to make his appearance in North America. But he's certainly probably one of the most intriguing talents among all of the talents that will be on display at the NHL draft in Nashville. Craig going to join us momentarily, talk about that. Would not expect the Jets to be involved in those discussions given their place in the rankings, but of course we will have complete and total coverage. Dave, you had on illegalcurve.com earlier this week, there was an interesting piece that you had posted about Zach Benson, of course, formerly, well, I guess, are they still the Winnipeg Ice? I don't know what they're called anymore. Formerly of the Winnipeg Ice, whatever the team.
The Wild. They're called the Wild.
Are they the Wild?
Well,
the owner, did they actually call,
they announced they're going to be called the Wild.
Oh, they did. Yeah. Cause he owns a team in BC called the Wild. He owns like a BCHL team, I think in BC that is also called the Wild. So I guess they'll be I'm not going to pronounce the first name, but
the Wenatchee Wild, according to Spency. That's what he's saying in the chat. Wenatchee or whatever.
So your ice jerseys are currently a commemorative piece
relic.
Now.
Yeah. You can probably get some ice jerseys pretty cheap, I would imagine. Very shortly, they'll be on sale if you want to.
They're nice jerseys. I have to say, like our photographers, Colby Spence, Alexander James, they shot some ice games for us this season. They really are. They were slick looking jerseys, I have to say. So
they are. So you can get that if you want to be, so 10 years from now, you can
retro
and wear your retro ice jersey and be like, hey, that's a cool jersey, dude. Do people still say dude?
I was gonna say, Drew, you sounded like, honestly, you may as well have been like
people say dude. There's nothing wrong
with
the
dude. Skateboard. What's
That's
his
right,
name? Steve Buscemi with the skateboard. Hey, fellow high schoolers.
Yeah. That's me in a nutshell. I was never cool in high school either, though, Dave. So that it doesn't really matter.
You've always been rad, Drew.
I've always been rad. Thank you, Ezzy. That's very kind of you to say. Nobody believes it for a second, but nonetheless, the draft will be coming up and all the intrigue and
make sure you join us starting at 6:00.
Yeah, there you go.
Wednesday night, Ezzy and I chatting nonstop.
The interesting thing about this draft, guys,
yeah,
is you mentioned Matvei Michkov, and I mean, nobody really expects him. I mean, if he's available at 18, something has gone horribly wrong, and the Jets should take him, right? But I mean, I think it gets, Montreal has the 5th overall pick, and a lot of Habs fans are hoping that he falls. I mean, we know Connor Bedard's going 1 to Chicago. We expect Adam Fantilli to go number 2 to the Anaheim Ducks, right? Replacing, when you think about it, Ryan Getzlaf up the middle, right? Leo Carlson could number 3 to the Columbus Blue Jackets. If he doesn't go 3, he's probably going to go number 4. But it's really wide open after number 3, right? Like you've got Will Smith out of the U.S. National Development Program, and it's just not. I mean,
doesn't Will Smith have to go to Philly, has he?
Yeah, exactly. He does have to go to Philly, West Philadelphia, actually born and raised, Dave. But I mean, this is a really strong draft. Drew just mentioned Zach Benson. Dave had a couple of posts earlier this week on illegalcurve.com. So if you haven't checked those out, I mean, Zach Benson's going to be a top 10 pick, guys. I mean, some scouts have him high as 5 or 6. Others have him kind of going in that 8 to 10 range. But this is a really strong draft, and that's why the comparisons have been made to the 2015 draft. Everybody remembers that draft with McDavid and Eichel going 1-2, right? So Craig Button's going to come on shortly. I just texted him, so hopefully he's going to log in shortly. He's been very busy doing lots of media this time of year, but for example, he's got Axel Sandin Palika, and that's who I was going to ask Craig about because he's got him 5th. He's a Swedish defenseman. Other people have him kind of going in that 10 to 15 range, right? And that's not where Craig thinks he's going to go. Craig mentions this every year when he comes on with us. He ranks them based on how he thinks they're going to be as players, 3 or 4 years down the road. So Craig's list is not a mock draft. I believe Craig is going to put out a mock draft if he hasn't already. It's a very deep draft, though, so it's going to be very interesting. It's also going to be very interesting to see if we have some first-round picks moved. I mean, I don't think anybody's expecting.
Well, Montreal has he.
Well, exactly.
Montreal wants to get to. They want to get to number 2.
Right.
Well, I mean, when was the last time, though? I'm trying to think. When's the last time, there's been sort of that huge shakeup among top draft picks in an NHL draft? It happens all the time in the NFL, where teams are always trading up or trading down in the first round. But I'm trying to remember the last time there was a huge, significant move that saw a team, rocket up the, make a big swing to move up in an NHL draft. And it doesn't happen very regularly. Because, again, the NHL is such a conservative league. Oftentimes they err on the side of not doing anything. And you don't really ever hear about, rumors of a team jumping up. I know what you just mentioned, that Montreal allegedly wants to move up from 5 to 2, but rarely do they ever pay the price to do so of years of future first round picks like they do in the NFL almost on a yearly basis, where teams.
But that's generally speaking, Drew, the guy in the NFL, if you're doing that, is expected to have an immediate impact.
Right.
Whereas in the NHL, you're not getting that immediate return. So there's always that hesitancy. Obviously, the Jets did it when they wanted to move up and get Logan Stanley when they did that in 2016, when they made, was it the trade with the Flyers that they wanted to move up, and they traded their first and second to Philadelphia to move up to the first spot where they could draft Logan Stanley. That worked out well. But anyways, maybe it's a cautionary tale of
it worked out well in game 4 against the Habs in the playoffs.
It did. It did. But anywho, the point is that
it worked out well when what's his name tried to take his knees out from him, leading to the 5-minute major against Edmonton. Who was the
Archibald?
Josh Archibald. When he went cannonballing at Logan Stanley's legs to get the Jets back in that game in the first round of that.
But look, I think the point Ez is making is that while there's a lot of expectation in the top 5, and obviously just one change can create an unbelievable domino effect. I think, and Rob is saying that this in the comments. The interesting thing is all the drops, the guys who drop, and look, Cole Perfetti. Right, the Jets weren't expecting to get him. He was expected to be a top 5 pick potentially, and the Jets got him at 10th. Kyle Connor. I don't remember where he projected, to be honest with you. But the fact that Boston skipped on him 3 times, and had that chance, and the Jets got him where they got him. I mean, that's it. Those are the interesting ones to watch, and so that is what the Jets have shown, that they can draft in that 13 to 18 range and still get a pretty good.
They could have also taken. They could have also taken Matt Barzal.
Yeah,
The Bruins.
exactly.
Yeah, that was not a
of
good
course.
draft for the Bruins, Dave.
No.
No, but they've done okay since then. They've still managed to stay as one of the elite teams in the cream of the crop in the NHL. But you're right, that was not a shining moment for the Boston Bruins, as has been laughed about and talked about many times over the years. But it'll be very interesting because, of course, the Jets are. I would not expect the Jets to be to move up when it comes to the NHL draft. I would not expect the Jets to be taking a big swing and moving into the top 10. Now, maybe can that be part of the Pierre-Luc Dubois return? And that's something that we've talked about a little bit, with the Montreal Canadiens and everything else, and where they're currently scheduled to draft. Could that 5th overall pick be something that the Jets are looking for?
Well, I'm sure the Jets would love it, but I
Right.
don't think Montreal has any intention of trading it.
No, and I don't think
Montreal
I
just
don't
seems
think
like they
any
want-
of the teams really want to move out of, like, Adam Fantilli, right? Like, all of the scouts say that if it wasn't for Connor Bedard, Fantilli would be the 1st overall pick, which is
Right.
obvious because Bedard is a generational player. But Fantilli is a generational player as well, right? Didn't he win the Hobey Baker Award, or he was a finalist for the Hobey Baker Award? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he had better numbers than Jack Eichel in his 18 year, right? Like, he had 63 points or something for the University of Michigan. So Fantilli is going to be a really good player. Anaheim's not trading that pick. And if you're Montreal, like, you're a team that's not going to be very good for a few years. And that's why I think Matvei Michkov makes a lot of sense for a team like the Habs. Like, if you're a team that's trying to turn the corner, I think Michkov has 3 years left, Drew, on his contract in Russia, if I'm not mistaken. But the point is that anybody who drafts him is not drafting him for the 23-24 season. You're drafting him for the 26-27 season, right? And look how long the Wild had to wait for Kirill Kaprizov, right? He was over in Russia till he was 24 years old or 25 years old, right? So it's very interesting. And I think with all of these names out there, especially with the Jets, with Pierre-Luc Dubois and Connor Hellebuck, I think some 1st-round picks could be in play. I don't necessarily know they're going to be as high as the Jets would like.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's funny you mentioned, the waiting game for Michkov. And, I think, I don't know who it was, I saw it on Twitter. They said, general managers are willing to wait for a player in North America and they'll draft him wherever they think they need to draft him. But that same player who they might have to wait for over in Russia, whoa, that might be a bridge too far. We might be hesitant to draft that player because he has to wait. We have to wait for him while he's over there. I mean, I don't think the Minnesota Wild in the least bit regret waiting on Kirill Kaprizov and finally getting him over into North America. Oftentimes, the top picks, I mean, nobody expects Connor Bedard to be playing anywhere other than with the Chicago Blackhawks next season. He's not going back to junior, barring some, completely unexpected turn of events. He'll be with the Blackhawks. But, that same, it is interesting that there's definitely a bias sometimes in perception about waiting for a player who's residing in North America versus waiting for a player who's residing in Russia, because it's not thought of as equal for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, it's not
because of the pro situation. It's because it's a pro contract versus a guy playing junior.
Yeah, and also, like, it's also not the time factor is not quite the same, right? I mean, to say you could, in theory, have to wait for a college level player for 3 years,
Right.
but you don't necessarily have to. Rutger McGroarty, for example, to use the Jets example, is expected to only play one more season of college hockey at the University of Michigan before he turns pro. A lot of guys, Kyle Connor, for example, played 1 year at the University of Michigan before he turned pro. So the expectation,
and Fantilli might turn pro, right? Like, I don't think he's
that's what I
necessarily
mean.
committed to playing a second year with Michigan, right?
Right, Ezzy, and that's the point. So, Drew, I'm just saying it's not necessarily apples to apples here because of the idea that, like, as he said, there's no real wiggle room here. You know that you're waiting those 3 years to get Michkov before he's playing. Whereas here, you could have to wait 3 years, but the likelihood is you'll get him after a year, maybe 2, but and at the end, worst case scenario, it's 3. But generally speaking, like, look at Chaz Lucius. Chaz Lucius, unexpectedly, we all expected him, especially based on his injuries, to keep this as a Jets theme, boys. We expected Chaz Lucius to play 1 more year at the University of Minnesota. He wasn't obviously very happy with how things had gone, so he turned pro unexpectedly after his first season in college. So, I mean, yeah, I just think it's a different animal between North America, guys here in North America and guys in Russia. And it also depends on your organization. Like, as he says, if you're the Montreal Canadiens and you're not going to compete for at least probably 2 more years, like not next year, maybe the year after,
Well,
then maybe waiting one more year after will really fall within that window of your organization.
I mean, I don't know that this, if Montreal, I don't know why Montreal can't be competitive next year. I don't know why they can't, and I hear that.
Have you seen their defense and goaltending?
Well, the defense is an issue, but the defense.
I know I know you're a big Sam Montembeault fan, but I'm not so sure.
No, Drew's more of a Caden Primo guy.
Look, and those are both valid points that you make, and that's obviously their shortcoming.
Montreal's going to be a bottom 5 team next year.
Bottom 5 is if they're healthy, they have a lot of talent and if you add in Pierre-Luc Dubois, there's a lot of talent there that I don't know that bottom 5 is necessarily
defense and goaltending. Have you looked at that defense, Drew?
I have looked at the defense. It's not very good. There's no question about that. So that is certainly the area of concern on the back end would be the goaltending and the defense, which would be their shortcoming. There's no question about that. But I don't think it's all so. You look at some of the bottom 5 teams, and they're really bad. Like they don't have any what you would
like Montreal.
Okay, but there's teams that some of those bottom 5 teams don't really have anything resembling talent. Montreal's got a fair bit of talent now up front that I don't know that it's necessarily foregone conclusion that they're going to be bottom feeders yet again. Although to be perfectly blunt, they probably don't mind being bottom feeders again, because then that will eventually allow them to get that other high pick or another year with a high pick that would allow them to shore up some of those shortcomings after they've certainly addressed the group up front. I would suggest with the litany of moves, and of course if you add in a Pierre-Luc Dubois or something along those lines. Not sure what happened to Craig Button. Hopefully we'll get him on at this point in time, probably more of a next week thing.
Yeah, I texted Craig, Drew, and no response, so he might be busy. Maybe he hit the snooze button. I'm not sure, but yeah, we'll try to get him on for next Saturday. Just getting back to the 18th overall pick. Obviously, it's really hard, to figure out. I mean, it was like last year, right, when the Jets picked Rutger McGroarty. It was hard to figure out who they were going to take. But you look at some of the players available, and just looking at the most recent Craigslist, Braden Yager, who played for the Moose Jaw Warriors, he's a center, big boy from Saskatchewan. And again, just because he's ranked 18th, there's a good chance he goes before 18th. Because if you remember, Braden Yager at the beginning of the 22-23 season was considered a top 10 draft pick. But it just shows you the type of players, guys, that are possibly available, right? Like he had 78 points in 67 games for Moose Jaw, added 16 points in the playoffs. Remember, Moose Jaw gave the Winnipeg Ice a lot of trouble in the second round, Dave, right? So Braden Yager, a guy like Nate Danielson on the Brandon Wheat Kings, he's a really good player. I mean, these are the types of players, like the Jets are going to draft a player that was one of the best player, if not the best player on their junior team or on their USHL team or whatever it is, right? I mean, there's a lot of guys available from the U.S. National Development Program. Obviously, Will Smith is not going to be available, but there's going to be some really good players available at 18 because of how deep this draft is.
Oliver Moore, 2 guys that are being talked about sort of in that mid.
Oliver Moore might be a top 10 pick, but yeah, he's a really good player.
Yeah, and again, the Jets, we know about their history of drafting players from the U.S. National Team Development Program. They've had a long history of tapping into that program to success, I'll point out. I know that a lot of people, and I hear it all the time, and I don't subscribe to the Jets need more Western Canadian players. The Jets need more players from Manitoba. The Jets need more better players. I don't care where they come from. I don't care where they play hockey. They need, and I don't subscribe to looking at a birth certificate as the determining factor where the players play. And I understand, I appreciate everybody's comments that would think different than I do on this one. The Jets need to always draft the best player available. I don't care what his passport says. I don't care what his birth certificate says. You draft the best player available, and then you figure out a way to make that player happy and keep them in town, assuming that you want them in town when their contract status allows them that freedom to choose, Dave.
Yeah, look, and the reality is that, people can say that guys don't want to stay here, but Pierre-Luc Dubois is from Canada, he doesn't want to stay here. Kyle Connor is from the States and he stayed here. And look, for all the people who talk about Connor Hellebuck, he signed a 6-year extension, right? Like he stayed in Winnipeg for 10 seasons. And so it's not as if guys won't stay here. Nikolai Ehlers, like there's the list goes on and on and on and on. We've talked about it. Blake Wheeler signed an extension. All of these guys sign extensions. So, I mean, you're right. It's incumbent on the team to take the best player. I mean, look, if I mean, I don't disagree necessarily though. If you have a guy who's from Saskatchewan or Manitoba, and you have a guy from a U.S. program, and it's a toss up really in terms of quality, then maybe I would tend to say, well, you're probably better off keeping him long term if he's going to be from the region. But I again, that would be my own bias, and that's my own way of thinking. But again, the Jets have disproven that in the sense that they've managed to maintain and keep. And look, Jacob Trouba wasn't like he hated Winnipeg. It was just, his family situation and why he wanted to be out in the States. And again, it is what it is, and you don't blame the guy. You understand the situation, and look, the other thing also is that's one thing the Jets have to become a little bit more cognizant of is taking guys, using them in their prime, right? We always tend to think the prime doesn't happen until you sign that third contract, when you get the big money. The problem is the Jets really need to be thinking about using guys in that middle contract when they're, really just hitting their peak. And if you have a number of those, kind of that Seattle mantra of Seattle being more second liners, but the fact is maybe you have more guys in that range and populating your team as opposed to, some really good ones and then a fourth line that just has no identity. So there's a lot of opportunity. And hold on, before I give up the mic, as one little trivia question. 1989 NHL draft. Who did the Jets select on this day in 1989? In the fourth round.
Can we get a hint?
He was subsequently traded. It was in the 62nd overall. That wouldn't be the fourth round. That would have been the third round. Yeah. But he was traded 4 years later for $1.
Chris Draper.
Well, you gave it away with
I was going to say Chris Draper. I don't know. Dave's always loved Chris Draper, maybe because he's a multiple Stanley Cup champion with the Wings and he was a really good player. But yeah, Chris Draper. Was that the last trade for $1? Like, did we ever see another trade for $1 after that?
Yeah, I think that would be the first and last trade ever for it.
Well, now they just call it future. It's like the Olsen trade to Freddie Olsen, of course, from Dallas to Colorado this week, where they traded him for future considerations, which, for the record, are nothing.
Yeah, future
considerations. And that dollar with inflation would be like $5 now.
Oh yeah, at least
it's an expensive dollar now. It's not just.
Could you imagine if they actually had the dollar and they framed like Barry Shankrow has it in some
No, Mike Smith actually has it, Dave.
So then it's in Russia.
Was he the GM in '89? I think so.
Yeah, he was. That was his responsibility. It was after John Ferguson, and that was.
He traded Chris Draper for $1 and then drafted 75 Russians.
Well, don't you remember we played back?
That was great. That was really good.
Back on the old place, and by the way, the old place being the radio station, and just a terrible company. And our thoughts and sympathies are with the good folks at 1260 in Edmonton. We tweeted about that earlier this week that they're going through the same thing that we went through.
You think they would have learned their freaking lesson?
No, they don't care. They don't want to. They don't want to learn
class.
It's unbelievable. No class. They don't care. They just don't care.
I couldn't believe it. I saw it on Twitter and I was like, they're doing it the exact same way. Like and again, the reality is corporations don't give a shit. Like they don't care. Like they know they're too big to fail. They don't care. They don't care. Like they can pretend this whole Bell Let's Talk is all BS because it's all corporate. So they don't care. And they know that they can do these things and there is no blowback. I mean, like someone like me who realizes, well, wait a second, I have Bell, home security. Well, I'm going to punt them and get somebody else. I mean, maybe you can have a small dent, but the reality is at the end of the day, they don't care. But the fact that they would do this again in the exact same manner to the folks in Edmonton is just so classless. And it's so, I would think it's beyond, but it's not beyond, obviously. And they chose to do it once again. And it's embarrassing, right? These guys went to commercial expecting to bring a guest on.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it cut to music. And I even listened, after talking about it on here, I was driving to the office and I turned on like 1290 for the first time in probably 20 years. And I turned it on to listen and I caught the end of the kind of going away message. And I was like, even the guy's voice was annoying. I was like, it's just embarrassing.
That was me.
Yeah, sorry, Mandel.
No, they don't care. But anyways, I wanted to make mention of that. Our friends at 1260, we spent a lot of time. Dave Jameson, of course, been one of our regulars. Alan Mitchell, I mean, Dusty Nielsen, Jason Greger, all those guys are going to land. And everybody else that I haven't mentioned and all the guys behind the scenes as well are all going, they're all fantastically talented, and they're going to land softly and in a better spot than where they had been. With the good folks, and I put that my tongue firmly in cheek, the good folks at Bell Media. So treating them the way they are, as per usual. That was an aside. I forget where I was actually going to go with that. I think Ezzy, you got something to say.
Well, no, I was just going to say it's really just unfortunate. Yeah, and why would you expect anything more from a horrible corporation? The way they canceled TSN 1290 in Winnipeg and just their track record. But yeah, just feeling for guys like Dusty Nielsen. And as you mentioned, Dave Jameson's a guy who we've had on many times, Lieutenant Eric, Jason Greger, former NHLer Jason Strudwick. These guys will be okay. It's just, we know how it felt back in 2021, right? Like it just gave you that sick feeling in your stomach. It just was a horrible way for the station to shut down, right? Like it just was the worst possible way you could do it. But at the end of the day, they don't care. So there's not much you can do.
That's right. Exactly right. Anyways, nonetheless, that'll be onwards and upwards as the case may be. This has been a fun show. It's been a fun Saturday morning. We're all just waiting for these other shoes to drop, and we've been waiting.
By the way, Drew, I've got some breaking news.
You don't have any breaking news, do you?
I do.
Oh, okay.
With my fancy illegal curve phone. Josh Morrissey is the style king.
Thank you. I'm thrilled. Is that because he wore that pink pink suit?
The Miami Vice suit.
Okay. Well, thank you. Congratulations for that breaking news. I hope that
it's breaking news. I mean, they just tweeted it out, right, Dave?
Well, I mean, I'm surprised they didn't name Blake Wheeler the style king based on everything else they've said without trotting Wheeler out left, right, and center. But congratulations to Josh Morrissey.
Lowry's a really well-dressed guy too.
Yeah, well, congratulations to all the contestants on the Style King. They just can't match up to our style here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, is clearly the case may be. But
you can't compete with that Sea Bears t-shirt. Come on, boy.
That is a nice Sea Bears t-shirt, as you got to say. You're rocking the Sea Bears won, I think, a couple nights ago, if I recall correctly. So
they did. Yeah, 2 in a row.
I'm looking forward to. It's sort of unfortunate. I wish they played more afternoon games. My son loves basketball, but they played a one Sunday afternoon game coming up in July that we have tickets to. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, it's funny, Andrew, I had a chance. A buddy of mine texted me and he said, do you want to go to the game?
Yeah.
And I thought he was talking about the Gold Eyes game, and I had my own softball game. So I was like, I can't. And then he sends me a video. They're sitting right on first floor at the Sea Bears game. And I was like, I would have gone. But of course, my love of softball couldn't allow me to.
That's right. The House of A needed you more than the Sea Bears did along the baseline, Dave. Big thank you to everybody for joining us this Saturday morning. Look, there's going to be news, official news. It's going to happen sometime very soon. When it does, illegalcurve.com. And if it's big enough and warranted enough and we're able to do it, because you know how our lives are busy and everything else, we might even pop in for a pop-up show. But keep it locked to illegalcurve.com.
Could be this afternoon, right?
It could be 20 minutes from now. We will see if we're able to do it. Wherever the news breaks, I can assure you, illegalcurve.com is going to be the destination. You can follow us on all of our social medias at Illegal Curve everywhere. Want to say a big thank you to Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press for joining us earlier this morning. If you missed any of the show, if you missed any of Mike's interview, there's an immediate replay here on the YouTube channel, and the podcast will be available coming up shortly as well. Dave M. going to do his yeoman's work, of course, getting that up and running. Smash the like button if you haven't already done so here on the program. Want to say a big thank you to all of our sponsors. They make the Saturday show, the post-game show, the website a possibility. Our friends at the Rady Jewish Community Center, the Rady JCC Sports Dinner comes on Monday. If you haven't got your tickets, radyjcc.com. We're all three going to be there. Come say hi to us.
Are we wearing suits, boys? Are we going to have to dust off the suits for this?
Yeah, it's a suit kind of night, Ezzy. Tie optional, nice. But it's generally a suit, a suit and nice shirt sort of thing. We'll make sure we get that over to you.
Pull out the suit that I wore to your bar mitzvah, Drew.
That's all I ever hope for, and I'm sure that fits very well. Nice and snug. Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rollies Transfer, Grid Park, and The Keg support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. We'll be back next Saturday, 9 a.m. back here on our YouTube channel, of course, on all our social media platforms. In the interim, illegalcurve.com, our social medias. Leave us some feedback here on the YouTube channel. Leave us some feedback on the iTunes page. Smash the like button. And, of course, we are going to be there wherever the Winnipeg Jets news breaks. For Dave Minuk, for Ezra Ginsburg and his beautiful nature background, I'm your host, Drew Mindell. Thanks, everyone, for joining
Happy early Father's Day.
Happy early Father's Day. Yes, definitely to all the dads.
Happy us.
And the moms doing double duty as dads, whatever it might be. Happy Father's Day, one and all. This has been the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast from Illegal Curve Hockey. For more great Illegal Curve content, subscribe to the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, follow at Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit your online home for hockey in Winnipeg, illegalcurve.com.